All right, everyone. We spent some time thinking about tests, and now we're going to look at performance or authentic assessment as another way to assess student learning. You'll see underneath this video that there's a link to a LearnBoard. What I've done there is pull together resources for you that summarize what performance assessment is, but also provide you links to dozens of examples of performance assessments in all the content areas, and primarily at the middle and high school level. I think there might be one or two that are upper elementary, but most of them are geared right to the age groups you're going to be working with. And what your task is going to be is you're going to create a performance assessment for the unit that you just finished teaching this past spring. But let's get started making sure we just have the basics down of what the differences are between traditional and performance assessment. So I'd like you to take a look here at the characteristics that define or describe most summative assessments, which are exams that we give our students, the traditional approach. And while it may seem counterintuitive that a test is not direct evidence of student learning, I'd like you to hold on to that for a second and think about how an authentic assessment might actually be more likely to give us direct evidence that a student has learned the knowledge and skills that were the goal of the learning. Let's look at these characteristics. So the big differences between traditional and authentic assessment is that students are doing something here, creating something, performing in a way that demonstrates their understanding and their abilities in that discipline or that content area. Very different from a traditional approach in which typically they're asked to recall and or recognize information and that they choose answers instead of constructing them like they do through a performance assessment. So you guys, like I said, are going to be creating a performance assessment as just to practice doing the process for the unit that you taught in the spring. There's a couple of different ways to think about approaching designing a performance assessment. So one approach to get us started is to obviously first identify the knowledge and skills that kids need to be able to know and to do. You've already done that. You have objectives written. But you need to start thinking about developing a project idea, if you will, or a task idea. These are some places to go to jumpstart your thinking, right? You might want to tie it to some kind of current community, local, or national event. It could be tied specifically to the world of work and what do quote unquote real people in the real world do with the same body of knowledge and skills every day in order to meet other people's needs or create things that serve the community. You could also think about how students might be able to use the knowledge and skills they've acquired to meet a need in their community through some kind of community service project. Those are just ways to get us to start thinking. You want to make sure that your authentic assessment or performance assessment creates a context that's meaningful for students. In other words, that's going to ignite their interest, make them care about what they are doing. So ways to do that is very obviously tap into real issues that are bothering them or occurring in their daily lives or in the community around them. Let's want to pose these questions to yourself as you're planning. The method I'm going to recommend that you use to plan your performance assessment is to use the acronym GRASPS. The first G stands for goal, so identifying what is the goal of this task that students will do. What role specifically do students have? Who's the audience for their product or their performance? What's the situation, the context within which this product or performance needs to be completed? Specifically, what are they going to create or perform, demonstrate, or show? And then finally, clearly articulate for them how their work is going to be evaluated. So I'm going to ask you to start here, and you're going to submit your graphs with your draft of your performance assessment that you'll be submitting. Okay, so you're going to, like I said, use the standard from your unit and those objectives and use the GRASP process to create a authentic assessment or performance assessment for this unit. What I'd like you to do before you start writing the details is to review what you've noted down in that GRASPS framework by using what Grant Wiggins calls the 6 A's. The 6 A's are authenticity, asking yourself, wait, is this really an authentic task? Is this something that people would actually do in the real world? Is it rigorous enough, or am I just having kids play in some ways? Are they actually applying the knowledge and skills that they've learned to solve real-world problems or meet a need? Is it providing an opportunity for them to do some kind of active exploration instead of just repeating what they've already learned? And does it have ways for students or build connections to adults? Have real-world adult connections for students? And the assessment practices, are the evaluation criteria clear? So I want you to pause before you move to the next step and take out this 6 A's framework and ask yourself these questions. And, you know, if you're saying, ooh, you know, it's not really authentic, go back to the drawing board, because you can do it. All right. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to write detailed guidelines for this performance assessment, and you're going to make sure you use use the GRASS to make sure all the elements are addressed. Use the 6 A's to check to make sure it's authentic and academically rigorous. You will also be creating a rubric and a self-assessment checklist for the performance assessment that your students will be completing. So just like the self-assessment checklists you have been using so far, you're going to create something similar for your own students. And you'll be submitting a draft of this on June 18th at 5 p.m. Remember, as with the other drafts, as long as you submit it on time, you receive full credit. I will be giving you feedback, and then you're supposed to use that feedback, apply it for a revision for your final submission, and the final submission will be graded. Okay, thank you.